Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. Join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ideal Investor Show. I hope you're all doing well and I hope you all subscribe to the paid subscription of our newsletter on Substack. And I would really like to see you there, not just because you want the information and should have it, but also because it's a nice little entryway to all the other things that we are providing for our clients. And, I understand that our programs for mentoring and investing are not the cheapest in the world. So if you want to have a much, much lower entry point just for a few dollars a week, you can get to know each other and us a little more and have a conversation with Axel, see how my situation fits in what they are offering, and then maybe we go from there. So that would really be awesome. So today I want to bring up a topic, and that is how inflation affects real estate investments. And you may have heard, if you're generally interested, which I'm assuming you are when you're listening to our podcast, that real estate is one of those investments that is somewhat protected from inflation. Why is that? If you think about it from the property perspective, obviously, in the first place, when a property is being created, all the different components, from the roof and from the 2x4 wood and from the floors and the concrete and the tile and the appliances and everything that goes into a house is obviously affected by any kind of inflation. So if you say, just for an extreme example, and it's not that long ago that we actually had that, inflation is 10%. So if a house that was originally built cost $200,000 to build, all the pieces added up together, and then it's maybe sold for something like $250,000 so that the builder can make a profit, and 20% is about reasonable average that they would make. Now, if the inflation is 10% in a year, and the builder is building the exact same house 1 year later, you have to know that now that same house, just to build it, costs $220,000, and if the builder still wants to make that 20% profit, you're at about $265 for 20% profit on that same house. Now, how does that affect any of the properties that you own? Well, it has to do with the fact that we are investing in residential real estate, which is basically by valuation a comparative market. What does that mean? When you go out and say, I want to buy a property right next to this new $200,000 house or this new $260,000 house, then the appraiser that is sent by the bank that you're getting your mortgage from is going to look at what are similar houses right around the house that you want to buy. And when that house next door has just been finished for, let's say, $250,000, and your house is basically the same, but it's older, let's say it's 10 years older, then the appraiser will say, okay, how much less valuable is it compared to a brand new house? And let's say the appraiser says, well, the new one is $250, so I give this 10-year-old one $210, right? So that's basically the difference in valuation. Now, 1 year forward, we had 10% inflation. You own this house for $210, but let's just for crazy reasons say you want to refinance it with a different lender. That different lender is sending out an appraiser again. That appraiser looks into your neighborhood and finds out the builder has finished another house right next to the one next to you. That one is $265 now. That means the one that's 1 year old is probably also $265. And guess what happened to yours? Yours is probably now in the $225 to $230 area. And why? Because the comparison says your house is still a little older than the next houses to it, but each one of the next houses to it have gotten more costly because inflation has increased the price to basically build a house like that. The other thing is, when we are thinking about investments, is rent. And the same thing is true. When a house goes from, like we said, $250,000 to $265,000, then the treasurer of the community the house is in is going to say, okay, this house is more valuable, So obviously we get a percentage of the value in property tax. So your property tax is increasing. Your insurance, your home insurance provider is going to say, okay, this house is no longer 250, it's 265. So to replace it, if it burns down, we have to spend 265. So the premium for your insurance is going to go up to allow for a 265 valuation. So you pay more property tax and you pay more premium for your insurance. Well, how do you cover that? By increasing the rent, if you want to keep all other ratios the same. And that is why people on the receiving end of inflation, they are oftentimes hit the hardest, because you have every right to say, I'm still providing the same value living space as I did before the inflation. And to get the same value out of the living space that I give to a family who is renting my house, and all my costs have gone up through property tax, through repairs, through insurance, you have to ask more rent just to maintain the same ratio. Now, there are obviously, if you were to do this every year, there are certain limits, because sooner or later the people that you want to be your tenants cannot afford 10% increases every year. But I wanted you to understand that inflation is basically a measure of the cost of all the different ingredients that go into the house and operating the house. And if you say, out of the space, I provide a certain value that this space has for anybody occupying it as a tenant, and you want to maintain that value, then you have no other choice than increasing your rent by the same amount that inflation is increasing, because everything else around you is going to go up in price as well. Now, the hope in this context is always that the people who are suffering through this inflation will also be successfully able to go to their boss and say, okay, boss, everything got more expensive, I need more money. The problem with that, and you may have heard that term, is called the inflationary spiral, which basically means prices keep going up, then wages keep going up, then prices keep going up, then wages keep going up, and so forth. And if that happens and going on for too long, and in your country or area this is happening, but in other countries it's not, then you get less and less and less competitive. But that's not really our topic. Our topic is, why is real estate an inflation-protected asset? Because we are providing a value in the space that we are giving to our tenant. And we need to keep an eye that that value stays the same, because your space, your house, your bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, living rooms are not getting any smaller just because we have inflation. So that's why you have every right, and you should always keep an eye on how much should your rent be adjusted in relation to inflation. And you can easily argue to any tenant, hey, I'm not making any more money. I'm just protecting my purchasing power. The value of space that I'm giving you has a certain value in purchasing power, and I just want to keep that the same as it was when you first started renting. So I hope that makes sense to you. Be well and stay safe, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.